Hey, welcome to Dual Citizens. I'm Stephen McAlpine and I'm with David Ould, and we're looking at what it means to live as a Christian in a world where you're a citizen of this world, but you're a citizen of another country as well, and the tension that has in the things that we have to look at in life and how we have to live, the ethics, those sorts of things. It's great to have you here, Dave.
It's great to be with you, and there's lots of tensions and lots of things to look at. Today, we're going to be looking at euthanasia laws. They're always in the media, but the Northern Territory has passed a few more recently. We're going to be thinking about the gender pay gap. Is there actually one? What does it mean? How do we respond to it? We're going to be thinking about the doxing of Jewish communities in the wake of what happened in October last year in Israel and continues to happen. And then we'll have a little think about Taylor Swift and that phenomenon and how we might understand it as Christians. Lots to do. Let's crack on. So euthanasia is back in the news. Never really goes away, does it, Steve? But it's back on. The Northern Territory has passed some legislation. It's looking very worrying. What's this issue all about?
Well, I guess it's the old slippery slope argument that keeps being denied by many people in this area of euthanasia, voluntary assisted dying, call it what you like. The Northern Territory government put out a sort of some questions, which is the sneaky way of doing it. What would the public think? What would you think, public, if we offered VAD to mentally ill people? And that's been a question that's it's been raised around the world. In fact, it's been offered in Canada. There are situations where people, veterans who are PTSD and looking for housing, have been offered a euthanasia, a good way to clean up the health bills of the country, really. And that's been a big issue.
It's a one-off cost. It's cheaper, isn't it, than ongoing care? Why? However, it seems like it's picking up, like the push for it. Why do you think it's picking up, particularly in the West?
Well, I don't think that's to do with just healthcare issues. I think it's to do with bodily autonomy, how we understand what it means to be human. But also the post-Christian West, you're seeing it rapidly push through. And part of that, I think, is a couple of issues, I think. How we look at life. Stanley Hauerwas said that if Christians are in 100 years' time, the people who don't kill their young and kill their old will be doing well. But we seem to be already at the place where we're, 20 years later, killing people in the middle of it. But it's not as if there hasn't been pushback. That's what I want to say. But this has come up, and it's kind of sneaky. You sort of pose the question, dip your toe in the water to see what the culture thinks of this, where people don't really think about it all the time until the government puts it into their mind. But that shows that government is trying to push something in a I guess like the simpering dog that's not allowed on the carpet, and it creeps forward inch by inch. I think that's what happens with euthanasia.
I've got one of those, and it is creeping forward inch by inch. As is one of the arguments against euthanasia, which is that it's a bit of a slippery slope, isn't it? As people will argue, what is purely voluntary at the start, then almost people feel compelled into. But is that true? Does that slippery slope argument hold up?
Well, even the liberal media in Canada over the last few years has talked about that issue. It's not as if it's just conservative, YouTubers or whatever it is, dual citizens for that matter. But you're seeing it. And anyone who says there's no slippery slope argument, it's nonsense. And if you're in a country where it's just been introduced, you have to say, well, look at the slippery slope over in that other country. It's not as if there's not pushback, as I was saying. So mental health experts came out and said, you're joking, right? Here we are trying to stop people killing themselves. And then at the same time, we're offering a state-sanctioned suicide to people who've got mental health issues, which raises questions about not just autonomy, but that happens in the Netherlands already, and Canada's in that direction. But also, it's like, is there a point where you say some people may not have the agency when they're in those sort of situations to make that sort of decision? And those things. I think the slippery slope argument is a very good argument, but I would also say it's a tipping point issue. It's what you think a human is and what you think a human's for determines what you think about this issue.
Right. And whether what's the value of life as well, right? I'm guessing once you get old and decrepit and someone else has got to wipe your bottom, is that a life that's still worth living? What would take to wind this all back? Like, is it just inexorably sliding down this slope, or can we yank it back, or even change the slope?
That's a good question, actually. Surely you'd think that good arguments in the public square are going to have to be fought on this issue. But unless you can change people's understanding of the goal of life, if it's personal happiness and health, etc., that's unless you can change that, unless you can give people a bigger vision of what it means to be human, it's going to be very hard. I think that's where the slope will go in a post-Christian setting. My own father died in an aged care facility, but it was interesting that over the very difficult years that he had a dementia and a bad version of it, it actually increased my level of grace and love for him in the same time, even though it was hard. And I watched carers love him in a way that other people perhaps couldn't. And I think it says something about us. It will change us when we do those things, don't you think?
Yeah, it has an impact on everyone around, and we have to make choices about how we're going to. And if we don't have a model, I guess, of service, of serving the other and sacrificial service, then that's just hard for us to do.
And that's where the church has to come in and say, you know what, we're not going to go down that line, and we're also going to be a counter community to that whole situation. I think that's what Stanley Harabus is saying. If the Christian community is the group that doesn't do that, then it will have served itself well, but it will also be a beacon. And don't forget, paganism in the early centuries, was exposed the young girls on the hillside because, as the Romans did, and who took them in? The Christians. There
And
was
then the pagans complained about it. They went, they're not even looking after their own. They're looking after our guys. What is wrong with these people?
Yeah, well, that just shows that you could, no matter what you do as a Christian, we'll play we'll play the flute for you and you won't dance. We'll sing a dirge and you won't mourn. It doesn't matter what you're going to do on that one. But it does come down to that issue, doesn't it? That what is a human for and who is a human for? And what we do as community.
Let me just make one more observation, Stephen. It seems to me as well, we've got something very deep to say about the fact that suffering is not always necessarily absolutely something to be avoided. At the heart of the Christian faith is the cross, where we see that God can do profound things in moments of great, great suffering. And so Jesus doesn't avoid it. He actually steps into it. And so there's a lesson for us there, isn't there?
Yes, and there is. And I think that's where our public square statements can come in and be compelling in a way that perhaps other arguments aren't. But also to say that there are many people who don't have a Christian framework who are feeling uneasy about this as well. And I think we can lean into those arguments well with a compelling argument and a compelling case and show people that there's another way than just becoming this dehumanized culture that just gets rid of its old, sick, young who are mentally ill or whoever for the sake of expediency. I think we need to do that.
Yeah, we've got a message of life to speak into a culture that increasingly doesn't know how to run away from death and then just has given up and gone, all right, well, here we go.
Well, dual citizens, we also talk about money because everything matters to God. But we're going to talk about the gender pay gap. That's a big issue that's coming up in the media recently. Talk us a little bit about what that actually means. It feels like women are being paid less than men. Is that something that's going on?
Well, that's the headline. Last week, the Australian Bureau of Statistics announced the latest pay information. And the headline is that across Australia, in terms of the average amount that people earn, men are earning more than women. The ABS data came in around 11-12% difference. Last year in November, the equality, I've got to get the name of this right. The Workplace Gender Equality Agency had a report where they said the gap is 21.7% between what men are earning and women are earning. That's outrageous. How dare they give men more money than women? Outrage.
Look, I'm not big on finances. I don't know anything about finances really, but if someone advertised in the paper to give someone a job at 21% less if they were a woman, I mean, there have been bad old days where women are clearly discriminated against the workplace. Why is that gap there in the broad picture?
Well, unlike you, I trained as a chartered accountant years ago. My degree involved a whole bunch of statistics and mathematics. So I've had a little look at this, and it's not quite so simple. What they're basically doing is taking just the average that all people earn and taking no account of how many hours people are earning, what the hourly rate is that they're earning. And it turns out that men and women are making, very different choices about the jobs that they do and how they do those jobs. And so, I mean, you see that there's stats, for example, in that there's far more men in higher positions on boards and so on, but there's also far more men in jobs that are risky and are therefore better rewarded. Oil rig workers and lumberjacks and those kinds of things. And so what you actually find is there is no single woman in Australia that's being paid a lower amount for doing exactly the same job as a man. It's just that that's illegal. Right? And it's also illegal to refuse to hire a woman for a job that she could do as equally well as a man. But the reality turns out that women, as we said, are making different choices. They're choosing to go into different industries. They're choosing to work different hours. And then also, Jordan Peterson had some great stuff on this a few years ago, noticing that,
I was just going to mention, I know nothing about it, but when he said even in the Scandinavian countries, in places where there's really strong equality, women do make different decisions to men.
That's right.
Even if there's equity pushed, it feels like things settle into different. That could say something about the difference, not between the gender pay gap, but the gender gap itself. Men and women just think and are different.
Right. And so the thing he notes in his work as psychology, and points to a whole bunch of research that we can link to in the show notes. He says, look, there's basically two things that determine the difference in how men and women behave. One is culture. So what the cultural expectations are of how you would behave. And the other is biology itself, that men are just simply more inclined to behave in certain ways. They're more aggressive, so they're going to push for, the higher jobs. They're risk takers, we've talked about. They have a different view to how they should be spending their time. Women are more, they're more maternal, aren't they? So that more of them are choosing to stay home with the children and so on. But here's the thing you noticed. When you remove the cultural distinctions, when you actually push into these societies where there's total equality of choice, and they're saying to girls, you genuinely can be everything, what it does is allows the biological distinctions to really come to the fore. Absolutely. And so in those societies where you've cancelled out the cultural differences, you get even starker differences in the choices that men and women are making, and whether they're going to STEM fields, engineering, again, the lumberjacks, there must be lumberjacks in Norway, right? There's all those trees, and so on.
His question. So opportunity at university shows that more women are studying at university. So it's not that issue. You've got to take in the issue that many women take a lot of time out to have babies, but also the state is also saying, this is how you should, we want to look after your kids from the age of 0 to the age of 18. And most women are now many women are saying, we don't want that. Now, here's the question. As dual citizens, as Christians, what should our response be? Because I don't want to go down patriarchy line, but nor do I say we're all the same. How do you navigate that tension as a Christian from a biblical perspective?
Well, you don't want to play into stereotypes, right? So we don't want to go back to Stepford Wives kind of scene and insist that people ought to do things. But we do need to face just the basic reality, which Jesus himself affirms. He says, in the beginning, God made them male and female. So there is a clear distinction between men and women. We're not just a few little differences in biology, but really basically the same. We are actually very, very different to one another. And so we'll make choices. And so I think what we need to do is say to men and women, it's okay to make those choices that actually come quite naturally to you, and yet the culture around you almost criticizes you for making. So, Mum, if you want to stay home from 0 to 18, or at least until your kids hit high school, which is the choice my mum made, no problem. Actually, we want to affirm that that's a kind of you're resonating with something deep inside you, and that's the way that God has made you. If you kind of go, for my sanity, I need to get out of here, that's okay as well. But what we're seeing in culture is just any distinction, the attempt just to wipe it away and refuse to acknowledge that men and women are different, and they choose different roles and they act in different ways. And again, it's this blurring out of the way that we're made.
Well, I reckon an interesting thing in the future will be to talk a little bit about the fact that the cost of a house is so high that many women do work as well. So it's something to look at. But there's certainly a sense that that push in both directions. And I'd say this, and finishing it, when people say, well, men can have it all, I say, well, they can't. If you want to sacrifice all of your life on the altar of work, you might lose your family and your sanity and your health. No one can have it all. We are not creatures.
That's right. Kirsten Burkert wrote a really, really good book a number of years ago called Feminism. She made two cracking observations for me. She went, flooding women into the workplace, all it did is flood the resource of workers into the workplace. It now takes 2 adult salaries to pay a mortgage when it used to take 1. They've just priced themselves out. Secondly, she went, one of the things that feminism has done is it said to women, you have the right to be as utterly selfish and self-centered as the men you've been complaining about have been. There's got to be a better way. And Jesus tells us what it is. God made us in a certain way. The seemingly endless conflict between Israel and its neighbours has erupted again, and having all sorts of consequences around the world, one of which has been that 600 prominent Jewish individuals have been doxed recently here in Australia. Now, you may not know what doxing is. Luckily, we got Steve here to tell us all about it. What is this doxing thing, Steve? What's going on?
Well, really, it's partly a product of the media age we're in, where information can get out quickly. But you see it as their information has been spread via the internet to their addresses, where they live, the kind of photos of their places, and it's really an invitation to go around and hassle people, and it's a real intimidation factor. 600 prominent Jewish people in Australia, many who would be from a more liberal perspective when it comes to the state of Israel, and activists have pounced on that. And someone like Clementine Ford posted that on her social media. And it's really a swarm mentality. And it shows you that intimidation isn't just going around saying things on the internet. It's actually saying, we can get to your private life. And that's what it is. It's a warning shot across the bows to anyone.
We can pull back the veil of protection and get right to you. Now, why is it the Jewish community in particular that's being targeted at the moment?
Well, clearly, obviously, because of what's going on in Gaza and what's happening in Australia. To me, I'll be honest, I was in Melbourne a few months ago for walking down the street, and there's a big pro-Palestinian rally, and I thought I would not want to be a Jew walking down the side of the street at the moment. It was hostile. And so what happens, I think, for the Jewish community, they're finding that it's indiscriminate at one level, and they're being targeted anywhere they are. And it just feels like a step up in some of the intimidation processes of the past. And doxing does that generally, but specifically it's been used in an anti-Semitic way. I'm going to have to say that because I'm not going to draw a distinction between here's the good Jew who does think this and here's the bad Jew who doesn't think that. Anti-Semitism has been with us in various forms and has rolled out in different ways, and I think this is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, why is doxing such a weapon in our culture? Why do you think it's arrived, and why is it actually so profoundly? I mean, it's intimidating, isn't it? It has a tremendous effect.
Yes, it does, and you saw it happen to J.K. Rowling actually, because of her stance on trans issues. Why, if you're online and then you want to log off because someone's having a go at you, you can do that. But this is a step more than that. This is saying you can log off all you like, but we'll turn up at your door. We're going to make this personal. And we already live in a culture which other people's opinions aren't just right or wrong, but they're good or bad. So we're a very zealous culture. It's the great irony is once you become a religionless culture, you keep the saint and sinner and the public crucifixion thing going. And that's what I think is happening.
But with no space for forgiveness and reconciliation, really.
House to have a conversation on a cup of tea with you to discuss your differences. And Douglas Murray, in his book Madness of Crowds, says something about the West doesn't have any forgiveness or reconciliation anymore. There's no sense in which you can be redeemed. So social media has this swarm mentality. I experienced it a bit last year when I wrote something that people disagreed with. On Facebook, I posted something on a blog that then was on Facebook. I had 350 hate comments on Facebook. And not that I read them, but you can see what doxing's aim is to get to the core of you and scare you. There's no way around that.
Yeah, but back in the old days, I used to get stuff sent to me in the mail, which I just used to go, well, that's a waste of a stamp, isn't it? But there you go. Now, it is crowds. It is people getting together. You just used the language of swarm a moment ago. What is it about this swarm mentality? What's going on there?
Well, it's mob rule, really. I mean, if you've seen The Simpsons, which sounds like a cultural faux pas reference now because no one's.
No, they're sharp.
Yeah, but when the town got angry about something, they'd all get into the town, and suddenly they were tearing the place apart. And it's, what are we doing this for? I don't know. We're just in a pack mentality. So that's the sort of thing that's happened. It's mob rule for the internet age. And it also is there to say, you may think you're behind a screen. You may think that you've got the anonymity of Twitter and make a comment, but we can get to you where you are. And I think it's become very dangerous. And obviously, someone's going to get killed somewhere along the line because of doxing. You can see that.
Yeah. And jumping on the bandwagon, perhaps without properly understanding what's going on as well. We talked a little bit last week about the Alistair Begg thing, and we kind of noticed, even as Christians, we're capable of doing this. We're capable of jumping into a mindset in the way that we accuse people and approach whether they're right or wrong. What's at stake here, and have you got any sort of thoughts on that? How we work out what is meritorious and what's not, and so on.
Yeah, we usually backfill our justification, right? So we go hard on social media, and it's very hard to come back and say, no, I got that wrong. Obviously, you see people take down tweets when they say things, and they hide or whatever. But rarely do we go, actually, I got that wrong. Because we know if we say we got it wrong, people aren't going to go, oh, it's okay, I forgive you. We don't live in that kind of culture anymore. And Tim Keller talked about that in his last book, that forgiveness is going to go by the wayside in a post-Christian framework. And if people do become Christian in the future, he said, one of the key discipleship issues is to show them how and what forgiveness looks like, because we don't assume it anymore in our framework, in our post-Christian framework. And I think that's a critical issue.
Yeah, no place for forgiveness. So I can remember apologizing profusely to someone many years ago now about I did something dumb, who would have thought? And I went and I took a big bunch of flowers and I said sorry. And I just remember that person not knowing what to do with that.
And I've had a situation where someone's apologized to me, who in an airplane line, he came after the flight after he'd had a go at us, my wife and I, and he was apologetic. And I was almost like, wow, people don't apologize.
Yeah.
Deal with it. But doxing is a way of saying there's no way back for you. We're coming to you. We don't accept apologies. We're here to threaten you. And I think we're going to see more of it. You've seen how teenagers have been suicidal or committed suicide because of the swarm mentality of online comments.
It's awful. And Jesus shows us better. He shows us not only how to say sorry, but also how to receive back into fellowship the one that has apologized sincerely to us. It's a much better way, isn't it?
It is indeed. Well, on Dual Citizens, we like to talk about the great philosopher poets of our culture. So now we're going to talk about Taylor Swift. Now, you may laugh at that, but there's something about her. I was in the airport twice in the last month, and it was full of tired Swifties blocking all the laneways and crying with tiredness and joy and love and adoration. Do you know anyone, Dave, who got Taylor Swift tickets in Australia?
Oh, my friend, I have one daughter and she's not quite 22 yet, but she got her ticket and went with her friend. And my oldest boy has been a bit of the man and been mocking her relentlessly about it ever since. But she went, she had a fantastic time. And it's been incredible to watch what's going on. There's something about Taylor that has filled a blank space in many people's lives. They just love her. I'm trying to get my head on what it is. I think because she is so aspirational for them, and yet at the same time, there's something of a bit of an anti-hero thing about her as well. Like she's perfect, and yet her life is a bit of a mess by any standards. There's all these men that she should have said no to, but she keeps shaking it off every time, and so women are appealing to that.
You're full of references there. You're right to culture.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've just been thinking about this a lot in the last few days. There's something big about it, though, isn't there? Like there's a joy. I was remarking to one of my friends. My daughter came back happy. Happy.
Yeah. Look, here's what I'd say about Taylor Swift. She gave the commencement address at New York University in 2022. She's no slouch. And if she does have a messy life, it's very, very much a curated messy life, right? She's not living in a trailer park, having 10 relationships. She's, on top of those things. Why did your daughter come back happy? Why is Tay Tay such a huge phenomenon? Tell us.
I think a couple of things. One, because it's resonating with her life. There's things that Tay Tay's saying from the stage which are resonating. She's reaching out to people, and there's a sense of, it's really weird because clearly, in one sense, her life is utterly unattainable. She flies around on private jets. Her boyfriend plays in the NFL. She's totally unattainable, and yet she's very close. She's very proximate because her heart breaks, which she basically lives openly or describes through her songs, and that's the core of life often at that age. They're done publicly, but in a way that says, you know exactly what I'm feeling, don't you? So there's an empathy to Taylor that's really interesting.
Yeah. When I say she's the philosopher poet, I'm not being facetious. I'm saying there's rarely been a pop star recently that can write in the person that you are. Do you know what I'm saying? Her lyrics are amazingly aligned with how people think and speak.
That's right.
She's incredible at that.
And so that leads me to the second observation, which is, a guy I went through theological college wrote a great little piece about this, John Forsyth. It's on the Sydney Anglicans page. Yeah, there's a transcendence and a corporate bringing into this greater thing that she's managed to achieve as well. And what is it? It's because, as you said, there's so many people where she's captured it, and then they get to come together and look around to each other and say, yes, we're all in this space together. And not only are we weeping our songs about all the things that are going wrong, but actually Taylor is lifting us up out and giving us this hope of something better.
That's a really good point. Now, here's a question.
Yes.
Argued in the paper, did Billy Graham, when he came to do his, his rallies at the MCG, have bigger crowds, more influence? What's going on? Is it Jesus versus Taylor at this point, or what?
No, it's a totally different culture with totally different aspirations. Billy Graham, I think, was, in one sense, did what Taylor did. He scratched the itch that was itching at the time, and as he does it, he goes, "It's not just me, is it? Like, we're all in this together. You belong to me." Almost, he said, "We can do this together." And Taylor does the same thing. She scratches the current itch, which now is very different to what it was in the late 1950s. I mean, we are literally 60 to 70 years on. We're not expressing things overtly in Christian ways anymore.
But we're still looking for transcendence, right?
We're still looking for the same things. We're still looking for community that gets us. We're still looking for something greater. We're still looking for someone to lead us and to follow. What's really interesting is, when I think about our largest growing congregation at church where I'm at, St. John's Parramatta, the cathedral in the heart of Sydney, the by far and away the largest growing congregation is the very people who went to go and see Tay Tay. But when they come to church, they're actually coming because they're expressing the fact that in Jesus, they're actually finding these things in a more permanent way. So they're finding the community that gets them. They're finding in Jesus the person that says, I get you. Ironic given that what we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
And they're finding the forgiveness. I mean, what's really interesting about Taylor is she keeps trying again, right? She goes, "Oh, we're never getting back together." But then she goes on to the next guy, and there's almost this redemptive cycle. And everyone's going, will the current one work? Well, Jesus kind of is a different lover, obviously, but he goes, this works. This is for real. This is forever. We're not going to be, we're not going to begin again and again and again and again. This is it.
Yeah, it's almost, you've had 5 boyfriends, and the man you currently have is not going to be your boyfriend for very long. So
that's right. And I'm number 7. Yeah.
It's the expulsive power of a new affection, as there's that famous sermon about what will solidify you. Here's one quick thing. When the lights come back on and everyone dissipates from the stadium, it drains away very quickly, because we went to the Harry Styles concert. Same thing happens. It's magic while it's there, and then suddenly reality hits back again. And it's very interesting, and you've got to try to build it up again. Something about rock star status does that. It's a sugar rush, but it's not sustainable in terms of protein for your life, I suppose, at some level.
That's right. Whereas with my church family, I'm going back. I'm feeding every week on Sunday. I'm with my growth group during the week, and I'm actually sustained throughout the week as well, aren't I? As I read my Bible and as I pray, and here's the good side of the internet as I interact
Yeah.
with others around me. So we can be fans together. We can geek out together on this great thing that we have in Jesus. And if you like your Taylor Swift or even your boas for Harry Styles, did you go with a boa?
I didn't, but I went very glammed up, to be honest.
You
But
went slammed up.
that's
Maybe we'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, something bigger and better in the Lord Jesus Christ. But if you like your Tay-Tay, go and watch your Tay-Tay as well.